Hey St. Catharines, Mayor Matt Cisco here. Welcome to yet another episode of talkSTC. It's great to have you here. We are chugging along. The weather is, the weather is the weather. It's been fun, but it's been a great couple of weeks since the last time I saw you. Bunch of really good events during Black History Month down at the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. We had the Sofa Fran Art Exhibition. We had Black-owned 905 and their vendor market. We had the Future Black Female Annual Variety Showcase. All kinds of talent within the Black community here in St. Catharines. It was great to see that showcase and to get out and support all of those folks doing everything they can to make sure we know and understand and appreciate the Black history that we have in our community. I also had the opportunity to participate in the Foster Festival, performing A.R. Gurney's Love Letters along with Ruth Unruh. If you've ever wanted to know the most uncomfortable situation I've ever been in, was reading Love Letters to Ruth Unruh. She would say exactly the same thing back to me. Very fun though, even if it was uncomfortable. My wife in the front row making jokes about me was the best part. We also participated in the Coldest Night of the Year event hosted by Start Me Up Niagara. A really awesome event, important fundraiser to support folks experiencing hurt, hunger, and homelessness. And I want to thank the folks at Start Me Up for putting on yet another great Coldest Night of the Year event this year. Today, I will be joined by Carrie Porter, who's the manager of the Housing Help Center of Community Care, to discuss housing within our community. And then after that, we will be speaking with Mishka Balsam, the CEO of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, to talk tariffs and how it will affect businesses represented by the GNCC, as well as a discussion about the provincial election. And we'll also talk about my state of the city. Always a fun time. But first up is my good friend, Carrie Porter, the manager of housing programs, Housing Help Center of Community Care, St. Catharines and Thorold. Now, the interesting thing is Carrie is also a former colleague. She served alongside me as the city councilor for Ward 4 from 2018 to 2022. She has been a manager, a program manager, and an acting executive director in the homelessness sector for 9 years. She's worked in almost every program funded by the region, so shelter, outreach, transitional housing, housing first, prevention. She is a proud Cape Bretoner, and she is now a sailor.
That's true.
That's true. Okay. So before we get into it, so what's the interesting note about you being a Cape Bretoner? Where were you born?
I was actually born in Halifax, but I grew up in Cape Breton.
Okay.
There was a maternity hospital, which you were also born at, I think a year later,
Yes.
in April.
Yes.
We were born in the same month,
Yes.
same hospital.
It's terrifying. The Grace Hospital in Halifax.
Yeah, Grace Maternity Hospital.
That was one of the weirdest things that we learned about each other when we first got elected together.
We also like the Hunt for Red October.
We do love the Hunt for Red October. That is true. We have so much in common. Maybe that's why we got along so well. Hey, so you were city councilor for 4 years.
Yes.
I always tell people you were the hardest working city councilor I had ever had the opportunity to work with. I say that to you when you're in front of me to make you blush.
I'm blushing.
What were you most proud of your time on council?
I think we got a lot of great work done, and we moved some initiatives forward on housing, to be honest. I remember texting you and texting like former Mayor Sunzik about some initiatives in other cities related to municipal development corporations. So I think that was, if I think back, my first time on council, and I didn't know what people were going to think of me, and I had some ideas. Things take a long time on council. Like I remember those first text messages were probably in my first year. We had some motions, and there was a staff report, and now it's actually happening.
Yeah.
So it's important to see. I'm proud to see work carrying on that council started. I think this council is doing a really great job. Honestly, I really do. But it's good to see that some of the things that we started are continuing. I was also proud of some of the bike paths, the active transportation master plan, and some of that work being done.
Yep.
So I was one of the best 4 years of my life. Very challenging 4 years, but it was. I don't regret doing it.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
I always tell people, like, one of my most frustrating moments when I knew I was coming in as mayor was knowing that you weren't coming in, because I think you were a fantastic city councilor. I'm saying that again to make you blush. I did want to know, though, if you could only pick one thing, what's your favorite thing about your former ward mate? People maybe didn't know this, maybe I shouldn't say it, but
we would send funny text messages.
Memes specifically.
Memes during council meetings.
Yes.
Especially during COVID. And I think he would send me text messages and memes to try and get me to laugh.
Yes.
Like you would look at my reaction. That I remember that fondly, and I don't know if anybody else, you have somebody else who kind of exchanges that with you. So
I don't. It's one of the things I miss.
yeah.
Okay, so you've worked within the homelessness sector for 9 years. As I mentioned, almost everything that the region funds, you've done at some point. What's the biggest change that you've seen in the sector over the years?
We've gotten better at collecting data. When I started, we didn't have a homelessness database system, so we have something called HIFIS.
Yeah.
When I started, we were tracking data on these weird Excel spreadsheets, and it was anonymous. We would send our reports to the region, but clients move around from shelter to shelter, program to program. There was no way of really carrying out the work and following the client through our various programs and kind of working together. Now that we have HIFIS, we've had it for a long time, and we've added a lot of staff and knowledge, and we've built up our system so everybody's inputting information into the system. You can actually track data and statistics and outcomes and KPIs. So I feel like that's been a huge improvement. There has been, in the last couple of years, a huge adjustment in funding to Niagara Region that is now on par with other regions. So we were chronically underfunded by the province for many, many years. That has been addressed. We're starting to focus on supportive housing. And I feel like our system, it's not perfect. I work in a very imperfect, difficult, challenging system. It's gotten better over time, but the challenges, the external pressures, the systemic issues have gotten worse. So it often feels like it's not getting better. So it feels bad sometimes, I'll be honest.
It's interesting to mention the increase in funding, because I raised that on a very recent previous episode, and said, like a couple of years ago, the provincial government, and sincerely appreciate, they almost doubled our funding. But they did it right around the time where our needs went beyond what other municipalities were getting. So they did double it. And I thank you. I appreciate it so much, but we need more, because the problems continue to get worse and the funding just hasn't caught up. It has never been able to catch up to where the problems lie.
Yes. And then you get into trouble when you start using other money to fund programs, and then that becomes a status quo. That happened with us in our housing program. We did see an increase in funding, but before that increase, we were actually using charitable dollars to fund numerous positions.
Yeah.
So the region was getting outcomes from us, and you can think that, the system's working okay, this program over here is meeting these targets, not realizing you're not actually funding it.
Yeah.
So that's when you start taking money from the levy, if you're the region, and from other places. Things have already been downloaded to the municipalities from the province. Everything's been downloaded over time. We're really suffering from that. It's been years and decades in the making.
Yeah.
So
in those situations where you're not able to prevent the homelessness from happening, you've got the rapid rehousing program.
Yes.
What does that look like?
So if you end up in the shelter system, the hope is that it's just shelter's supposed to be temporary. The hope is you can resolve your situation, stay there temporarily and get out. But we know how difficult it is to get out of shelter. Once you get in there, it's difficult to get back out again. So because of the data we were seeing, or the region was seeing, that a lot of people were ending up in shelter and not being able to move out on their own as quickly, then they were becoming chronically homeless. So that's staying in shelter for longer than 180 days. So rapid rehousing is a practice that emerged in the US. It works, and it was a pilot project here. So we have a caseload, 2 caseworkers. They have a caseload of 25. We get a list from the region every week on a spreadsheet of people in shelter who meet certain criteria. We go out and meet these folks, and we try to get them out. It's brief case management. There is some temporary subsidies, and we work to get people out. So they've been able to house they had 47 placements. Some were families and couples, so it was more than 47 people. But they did 47 placements in 13 months since the beginning of January, which is huge. It's a lot of shelter beds, and our goal is to try and house someone within 1 month. That's our KPI. So we were meeting that target. Sometimes things line up and we have the right landlord and the right situation and we can house someone in 2 days. Sometimes it takes longer to work with somebody.
So, I mean, the system has challenges. There are successes, obviously, but where do you think there's the best opportunity for improvement?
I think just in terms of our own system and the areas that we can control, I think aligning rent subsidies and ensuring that there are some rent subsidies to people very much on their wits' end and about to become homeless, and having the ability to do that. Flex funding, we have some internal flex funds we have through charitable dollars that we use sometimes to help top up like a rent repayment agreement with a landlord, for example. I think if we can really target and try and stop the flow of people going into the shelter system, also understand where we failed. I really like that data. Like, somebody's worked with prevention, they ended up in shelter. We want to be able to look at why, or if they reached out and we didn't think it was a priority and we were able to document that this is a low priority, but then they end up in shelter. What did we do wrong? I think data is important. I think investing in solutions that work and being very careful around where there's scant resources, not doing things that are knee-jerk, which I find it's a real challenge because, to be honest, there's a lot of pressure on our system, our region, our local elected officials to solve homelessness. And so I'm seeing people running to try this, that, and the other thing. And I think we really need to take a step back, look at best practice, and try and align and look at what is working. I do think we're underfunded in prevention. I'm not saying this as not just self-interest. I do believe prevention is not well understood. There's a huge role, and I do think it frees up shelter space. This is really a focus for me. I care about our shelter partners. I don't want to see clients working with us end up in shelter. But what I can say is if they do work with us, we're not able to save their housing and they end up in shelter, I know that they're not staying in shelter for as long because we've already done work with them. We may have helped them open a bank account, get on the Niagara Regional Housing waitlist, done their ID, made referrals to various programs, and some of my staff will continue to work with people, not in rapid rehousing, but who end up in shelter. There's a lot of cases where a unit comes up. We've just been working with someone, they end up in shelter, and we've got the right fit, and we're able to move people out. So prevention works in so many different ways, and I do think it's something that we need to be looking at. If we're going to expand other programs, if you're not expanding prevention, you're not shutting the front door into the homelessness system the way you need to.
Okay. So last question, and you've only got so let's say you're getting on an elevator and Premier Ford and Prime Minister Trudeau are both on the elevator, but you're only going 2 floors, so you got 10 seconds. What are you going to say to the Prime Minister and the Premier?
I'm going to say to the Premier that social assistance rates need to double.
Okay.
Maybe in the case of Ontario Works, more than that. That would solve a lot of the pressures that we're all facing. And I honestly think all of the mayors and all of the elected officials, this is something we should all unite behind. If Ontario Works rates double tomorrow, you would see a huge reduction in encampments and in shelter stays. Okay. That's the solution. That is actually the solution. We're fighting about a lot of different things right now, but there's a bigger piece of the puzzle, and we need those puzzle pieces. They have to give it to us. For the Prime Minister, I would say you need to go back and invest in the housing programs that you used to invest in, that you dropped in the 1990s. Okay. They've never ever replaced those funding and those programs that built the co-ops and a lot of the social housing. And if that funding were to continue, it's been said that the rate of homelessness would be half what it is today.
All right. That was a terrible 10-second answer, but a fantastic answer.
I had to get it in.
I figured
Thank you.
Carrie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back on talkSTC. and welcome back to Talk STC. I am excited for my next guest. It is Mishka Balsam, the CEO of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. She's responsible for developing and implementing initiatives that are designed to strengthen the business climate in Niagara and support the economic prosperity of the region. Mishka, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mayor Cisco.
I'm happy to have you here. You are actively involved with a high number of community organizations within Niagara, other municipalities across Ontario and internationally, including the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership and many more. You also sit on the Niagara College Board of Governors, the Brock U. Goodman School Advisory Council, and you are the Vice Chair to the Chamber Executives of Ontario. That is a resume.
Thank you.
Do you enjoy all of that additional work in addition to being the CEO?
You know what, I until recently was the chair of the Board of Governors for Niagara College. So since, I'm not sure what month are we in, February.
Yes.
So since the fall of last year, my term was up and I really enjoyed it. I'm currently still involved with the Goodman School of Business at Brock University on their advisory council, as well as a high number of other organizations. I find it actually a privilege. I find it's wonderful to have the opportunity actually to give back to our community in one shape or another, and in any way, shape that we can support these tremendous organizations that we have. When we specifically look at Brock University and Niagara College and seeing what economic driver and importance they play in Niagara, for Niagans, for businesses, for our members of a chamber, it is critical. And so I've always honored when I'm being asked to be part of it, and I consider it a privilege. And I really do encourage anyone who's interested in it to really explore that. I'm going to digress here slightly,
Sure.
but one of our advisory council, we have a high number of advisory councils within the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. One of them is the Next Niagara.
Yep.
Those are the emerging leaders, the next leaders that are coming forward. And we have just recently held an information session for them to saying, how can you get involved with advisory councils, with boards in the community, in these leadership roles? And the interest was extraordinary. We had a waiting list double of what we could accommodate of people and emerging leaders who are saying, I want to get involved in my community and I want to make a difference. To see that and to mentor that a slight bit ahead is, I think, what is really making a difference in our community. It strengthens us as a community.
Oh, I agree completely. And I will tell you, anything that has to do with education, anything that has to do with youth, like I'm always on board. So kudos to you, because I can't think of too many better things that you could be giving your time to.
Yeah.
So Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, I mean, obviously I know who you are. We are regular conversationalists with one another. But for the community, what's the GNCC all about?
I think we always say that our purpose is to champion the business community, and we find that we do this because we believe that actually Niagara has the ability to be strong, prosperous, healthy, and economically sustainable as we move forward. But we have, as it is the same as across Canada, we have 95% of businesses are small to medium-sized businesses. Mm-hmm. Many of them 100 employees or less. So often they have the sense our voices might not be heard, but we're stronger together. We're stronger together when we come together as a sector, as we come together as a community of businesses, and ensuring that we actually as a chamber can give them voice and advocate on their behalf. It's sometimes hard when everyone is trying to, work with a full team, trying to fit that empty seat that they have, trying to open up a new supply chain, trying to deal with customers here. There often, and other things happen, and policies that might not be aligned with them, might not support them, grants they can't access. How can we give them voice? How can we support them? So the advocacy is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that we offer them services to make it more cheaper for them, less expensive for them to go forward. So we have benefit plans, we have other ways that they can buy into that are preferred rate, because we again come together as a group. And lastly, I think it's the networking part of it. If we come together in a room, if we have a conversation, it's different than if I get an email from you, if I see you somewhere on social media, because I can put a face to it. And I really have to say, sometimes, like all the events that we do, I can say that each and every time, if it's our events or other gatherings that I actually attend, when I leave, there's something that I take back from it, something that I take forward. It might be a follow-up meeting. It might be for us to connect someone with someone else that I did not know about in beforehand. And if we can be that connecting link to a business, then we're stronger as a community. So we're doing everything to champion that, because we truly believe if our businesses are strong in this community, our economy is good, and we also have a good social net at the same time. It results in good jobs, it results in good wages for people, and we as a community need to come together.
That's fantastic. I think that you hit everything there. So you've been in the role now, is it 9 years?
Mm-hmm.
So, challenging times now.
Yes.
Over the 9 years, what have been the biggest challenges, and how does the present situation with the threat of tariffs compare to that?
I think for most businesses, the biggest challenges were probably 20 and 2021.
Yeah.
The COVID was unexpected. We were not prepared for it. Business did not know how to react to it from one day to the next. I think our businesses were closed. We were working from home. We were looking at screens. And the threat of health and pandemics and others was really difficult, I think, to work through. We made it through that period of time, and that likely in the last 9 years probably was the biggest threat facing most businesses. If I look at the current climate, and maybe it's because of the day we're meeting, there's a lot of conversations about the impact of tariffs and the trade situation that we have with the United States. Currently, 72% of Niagara's exports rely and go to the United States. Yeah. That represents about $6 billion in exports from here there. And when we look at all of Niagara, we have just under 30,000 employees directly tied to export businesses. If you look specifically at St. Catharines, we have 9,000 jobs that depend on it. So when we look at it in an overall picture, so how much does it represent? The 30,000 in Niagara represents about 13-14% of our workforce, directly linked to it. So for us, our eyes are all on that situation, and I think that reflects how our businesses feel at the same time.
It's interesting. I've told people, recently I've started to feel, that, I don't know if you remember, March 10th of 2020, right before everything was about to happen. And I think a lot of us had that feeling in our stomach that we knew something was coming, but we didn't know what, and it was that uncertainty which scared us. I feel like I've been walking around with that feeling for a while. And I have the benefit, I'm the treasurer of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, and we deal with environmental and economic marine issues on both sides of the border. We have 260 mayors across the northeast of the U.S. and Ontario and Quebec and Canada, all working together, and we've all recognized that this tariff piece and what it can do to the supply chain on both sides of the border, it could be devastating, and I've been able to sort of view it through that lens, but when you boil it down to those numbers, 30,000 jobs, like you said, 14% of the jobs directly tied to American exports. This is a scary time for a lot of people. When I know the chamber's there to support their members, what sort of messages are you giving to your members? What sort of support are you offering at this time, and what's your advocacy work looking like?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, because we really ask our members at the same time, where do they see their impact? What supports do they need? So I think in the first place, we have always had a partnership with the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership. So we're looking south of the border. Who are our partners that we have had? What is the voice down there? How can we strengthen this? How can we strengthen our partnership that we have so that we can bring businesses together and we can bring organizations together, again, with the purpose of having a louder voice and hoping that this voice is being heard at the state level as well as in Washington at the same time. So there's a lot of effort towards that part of it. And it's really nice to see, because we also have Windsor on board, we have Chatham on board, we have Hamilton on board as chambers of commerce and organizations that all have come together. So we think that this is key. Also, it gives us a really good understanding of what happens on both sides of the border and what is the data that's driving it. But it was interesting to see the U.S. Chamber of Commerce released just some data from a recent survey that they had, and it mirrors the conversations that we have had with our partner organizations. And the idea is that American businesses and people actually don't want this trade situation either. And I think sometimes we need to hear this on this side. That is really not what people want to see. I think for the longest time, people have seen the benefit of the partnership that we've had and the trade that we've created. But with that said, I think we also need to look at it. I think I feel the ambivalence in the marketplace. I think when you relate it to COVID or the sense of mental health and how does it impact people, it does have an impact. But I think we also have to look at what are our strengths and what are opportunities. Because I think sometimes when we're pushed against the wall, back against the wall and challenged, we might make the decisions we otherwise wouldn't have made.
Yeah.
So I think currently when you ask him what we're advocating for, interprovincial barriers are there. They don't need to be there in so many sectors and areas of it. We have advocated them for as long as I've been at the chamber to say, remove them. There's been a study done by an economist or a couple of groups and saying if we would remove in Canada our interprovincial barriers, it would add 1.9% to our GDP.
Yeah.
And then you compare it with the impact that tariffs has, and we have an opportunity when we look at those numbers and saying, can we do it differently than what we have? We're also looking currently at saying, like, what are the other restrictions people put on? Are we actually supporting our businesses as much as what we can? Are there tax reliefs that we can put in place? Other areas that we need to look at? And lastly, I believe, and I think we learned this during COVID, I'm going to say it's communication, communication, communication. We need to make people aware of it, of what is happening and what are the opportunities. When we specifically hear from our members, they're saying, I need some practical tips, like how am I going to do this? Where am I going to go next? And I think that is really the purpose of what we can do at the Niagara Regional, at the St. Catharines level, is to saying, really working one-on-one with those businesses to saying, here are the differences that we can make. It comes down to the practicalities. Yeah. Where is my next trade opportunity? And Canada has 50 plus trade agreements and partnerships across the world. How can we strengthen those? And our members are asking it, saying like, where's the next trade mission to Europe? Can we come along? Yeah. Where is this next thing happening? And I think that's key to seeing and supporting them so that we can make it through this.
I think the diversification of our trade is going to have to be the key, right?
Yeah.
Mishka, thank you so much for coming out. It's appreciated. And we'll be right back after this on talkSTC. St. Catharines, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of talkSTC. I want to give a big thank you to my friends Carrie Porter from Community Care, as well as Mishka Balsam from the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce for coming in and talking to us today. A lot of important topics we discussed, and I will simply say I look forward to seeing all of you next time as we discuss even more important topics right here on talkSTC.